Welcome to Warhammer 40k lore in the Bible, where I pull from Warhammer 40k lore to help explain biblical lore. And today we're going over the C'tan. I also do these in short format, and guys, I don't know what's going on with those. I went from getting 1k, 2k views to 70 for some reason. I don't know what's going on with that, but I do release them every Tuesday. And I also do react videos with Warhammer 40k lore, and with the biblical veneer, kind of like this. But anyways, also guys, take the wikis and the lexicon with a grain of salt, right? And the way I do things is we get into the Warhammer 40k lore first, just to set the stage, so you can kind of understand what's going on in the biblical side of things, and because they are kind of similar, and you'll see what I mean by that. But anyways, and then we get back to Warhammer 40k lore. Let's get this started. It is said that the C'tan were born during the creation of the universe itself, formed of the insensate energies unleashed from the churning mass of primordial forces. Long before the first planets formed and cooled, these earliest self-aware entities emerged from the seas of plasma and solar flares. The entities, who would later be known as the C'tan, bore little resemblance during their early stages to the terrifying entities they would eventually become. In their initial phase of evolution, they were merely titanic parasites, suckling upon the stars that bore them, shortening the lives of their solar hosts by uncounted millennia. In time, these star vampires learned to fly through the cosmos upon diaphanous wings of magnetic flux, leaving their birthplaces and drifting to a new feeding grounds. The energies required to sustain them resulted in the C'tan paying no heed to solid matter, for even the eternal fires of massive magnetism of newborn planets were insufficient to register on their monstrous hunger. Okay. These beings continue their benign existence with the little conception of the universe until the intervention of the Necron and C'tan. Since the earliest times, the Necron and C'tan had studied the stars to understand their baleful energies, seeking some power to unleash upon their bitter enemies, the Old Ones, during the war in heaven, and find a cure for their short lifespans. The Necron and C'tan, having been defeated by the Old Ones and scattered to the halo stars, had fallen into civil war, in the Second War of Succession. It was during this period that the Necron and C'tan, under their silent king Sarek, had perceived anomalies in the oldest dying stars. They had discovered a sentience more ancient than the corporeal life form, or any corporeal life form in creation. Beings of pure energy and complex skeins of etheric energy. These beings found feeding upon the solar flares and magnetic storms of bloated red giants were perceived as the progeny of the Necron and C'tan death god, who would act as weapons of retribution to cast down the Old Ones. These beings would come to be known as the C'tan, the star gods in Necron and C'tan language. There are various conflicting accounts about the circumstances of the discovery of the C'tan. The archives of Solemnus claim their discovery was accidental, a chance discovery made by stellar probe during the investigation of a dying star. The Eldari account within the Book of Mournful Night claims that the raw hatred the Necron and C'tan felt for the Old Ones sang out across space and served as a beacon for the C'tan. Regardless of the circumstances prior to the first contact, contact was first established with the C'tan, known as the Azagorad, the Nightbringer, which was born upon the very star which the Necron and C'tan first lived their brief, morbid lives. Upon manifesting across the incorporeal starlight bridge, the Nightbringer was incarnated within a body of living metal, the necrodermis, and brought with it the curse of death, Having fed upon the flavorous power of a star, the Nightbringer found delight in the Necrontyre's awe and fear, and had begun slaughtering those which had brought it into being, feeding upon their terror and suffering. Only the desperate pledges of servitude were the Necrontyre able to convince the Nightbringer that there are other species beyond number for it to destroy. Soon after that, the Necrontyre awakened many other star gods, the Necrontyre becoming their willing servants in the war against the Old Ones. Soon after, the Necrontyre awoke numerous other C'tan, which, like the Nightbringer, craved worshippers and slaves. Although such servants soon descended into murderous insanity brought on by the presence of the star gods, one C'tan in particular outstripped all the others in accumulating followers and devotees. Mephet Ran, the messenger, being one of the weaker C'tan, it instead gained power through guile and persuasion to secure its future, even sending its slaves to serve other C'tan to curry favor. My goodness, I'll learn how to read one of these days. So we got into the fall of the Necrontyre on my Necron video 2 weeks ago. So we get into this. The Necrontyre now became soulless Necrons, and the C'tan now fought as one, thus dooming the Old Ones to eventual defeat. Planets were razed and suns were extinguished, and whole systems were devoured by black holes summoned by reality-bending powers of the star gods. However, as the C'tan feasted upon the lives of countless species, the deceiver convinced the C'tan that they themselves were the greatest feast to be had. Excuse me. And the C'tan fell to civil strife as the greatest among them consumed the weaker ones. With this reprieve, the Old Ones, nurturing of younger races, the Eldar, Rashan, Khanib, and the Korks are part of that as well, and many other, had finally borne fruit and were unleashed upon the forces of the C'tan and Necrons. During this time of great infighting amongst the star gods, the sentient warp weapons that would become the Eldar gods likewise fell into infighting. Pacts were made and broken, and the line between the ether gods and star gods blurred. As the hot-blooded young races nurtured by the Old Ones spread across the galaxy, their warp-spotted magics battling the arcane science of the Necrons, the empire of the C'tan was driven back as the warp was an anathema to them. Oops. Oh my goodness. Okay. Sorry. Battling the arcane science of the Necrons, the empire of the C'tan was driven back, as the warp was an anathema to them, and the C'tan found themselves driven back by their relentless advance. The C'tan unified for the first time in millions of years, with a C'tan known as the Magladroth, the Void Dragon, developing a plan to seal the warp from the material universe using network of blackstone warp suppression pylons, such as the ones upon Cadia, and within the Cerberus Shroud. Likewise, the C'tan had sown a terrible crop within the genes of the small tree beasts that would one day become humans. These terrible genes would one day manifest within humanity in the form of pariahs, in which could be utilized in the form of Necron pariahs. The C'tan were also finally able to breach the Old Ones' galactic warp tunnel network, thanks to a C'tan known as the Nyadrazatha, the Burning One, using a series of living stone portals known as the Dolmen Gates. Funny that we mentioned the Burning Ones, but we'll get into that on the biblical side of things. Okay, within the webway breached and beset by warp spawn perils, the Old Ones had finally perished. With the C'tan have spent much of their energy to achieve this victory. They soon began to fall upon one another in personal wars inflamed by the deceiver. They began to ignore their slave race. As the star gods battled one another, millions died as entire star systems were consumed. It was then that the silent king Zarek had chosen his moment to finally turn upon the C'tan. In the case of Landu Gor, the Flayer, it was destroyed, whereafter it cast the Flayer virus upon the Necrons. In most cases, however, the C'tan were assailed with arcane weapons such as hypercannons and fragmented into shards and held within multi-dimensional prisons known as tesseract labyrinths, to later be used as unwilling weapons by the Necrons. Other C'tan may have simply entered stasis to the Psyker swarm unleashed upon or by the Old Ones, depriving the C'tan of their much-needed sustenance. Awaiting for the day that life flourishes throughout the galaxy. However, according to the Book of Mournful Night, a C'tan known as the Sara Noga, the Outsider, may in fact remain the sole intact C'tan, having become too terrible in its madness to be defeated. Others claim that it may have also rent itself asunder. Alright, now we're getting into these 7 kings. And these are the chief ones. These are the chief fallen angels here, right? So, Revelation 17:10. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. All right. So, we're going to see that this red dragon shows up, right? And I want to ask you this question. Are cherubim ever described as serpents or dragons? No, they are not. But there are ones. Nope, not that one. This one. So this is seraph, the word seraphim. Okay? And this shows up in Isaiah. So Isaiah 6:2. Above it stood the seraphims. Each one had 6 wings. With 20 he covered his face, and with 20 he covered his feet, and with 20 he did fly. That is the word seraphims. Where is it? Right here. Fiery serpent. So, what is a dragon? A fiery serpent. So, Satan is a cherubim, is a seraphim, not a cherubim. Okay. So we see that there. Revelation 12:9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And they're an allegory for stars and stuff like that, right? We're going to see that here. So the angels, or stars, are an allegory for angels. Yeah, I think I said that right. Anyways. So, Revelation 12:2, and 3, I should say. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. So, this is the kingdom of Satan right here, right? And they're the 7 kings, right? 8, including the beast, but we won't get into that. That one's very interesting in itself. But yeah. So there's 7 of these chief ones. Now we get 2 of them in the Bible. Now, so this is Isaiah chapter 14. This is the Lucifer scripture, right? So in verse 25. And I will break the Assyrian on my land, and upon my mountains tread them underfoot. Then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders. So he's got control on some parts of the earth, right? And we know that God gave the nations unto the world, right? So there's these principalities. You got the Prince of Grecia, right? And Daniel, and the Prince of Persia, and stuff like that, right? There you go. Okay, so now, Isaiah 14:25, that will break the Assyrian of my land, blah, 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 blah. Oh, no, what am I doing? We're going to see he is a seraphim as well. Let's go to verse 29. And by the way, this rod and this staff shows up a lot with the Assyrian. And he's identified as the destroyer. Staff of the destroyer is coming up in a few videos down the road. May even be next week, I don't know. Anyways. Okay, Isaiah 14:29. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his throat shall be a fiery flying serpent. So he is a seraphim. Okay? this one. We're going to see that the serpents and the cherubim are separated here in the book of Enoch. And let's go to Jude. We see that it endorses the book of Enoch. So in Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all. Blah 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 blah. It pulls straight from the first Enoch, chapter 1. My goodness. But yeah, so that's a good endorsement. Now, it's not supposed to be scripture. Okay, the book of Enoch even tells you it's not supposed to be scripture. But anyways, I digress. Okay, let's go to verse 7, chapter 20, verse 7. Gabriel, one of the holy angels who was over paradise and the serpents and the cherubim. So there you go. So Satan and these guys are seraphim, in my opinion. Okay. Now we're going to see that this Assyrian character is identified as the destroyer. Okay. Isaiah 10, 5-7. O Syrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. There it is again. There's that staff. And I will send him against the hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him charge, to take spoil and to take prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Howbeit he meaneth not so, neither does his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. So there you go. And here we go. And for he has said, Are not my princes altogether kings? Very interesting. All right. So now we have that in the destroyer. And by the way, let's bring this up here. Nope. Where is it? Right. Abaddon, the angel of the abyss, a destroying angel. So he's the one that comes up out of the abyss here. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. But in Greek, he had this name, Apollyon. So very interesting. So this is the Assyrian, the destroyer. All right. Now let's go back here. Now we see, we got the first two, Satan and the Assyrian. But it says there are 5 that are fallen. Right? Okay. And by the way, this where it says, when he cometh, he must continue a short space. I believe this is the Assyrian. Or, yeah. Anyways. And another other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. I believe that is the Assyrian. But, anyways. I digress. So let's go here. Chapter 69. Starting in verse 3 here. And these are the chief ones of their angels and their names, and their chief ones over hundreds and over 50s and over 10s. So these are the top dogs. The name of the first is Jaquan. The second was named Espiel. The third is named Gadriel. And the fourth was named Penume. And the fifth is named Castilla. This one's very interesting because there's something that pops up there that is in today's day and age, we'll just say. I'll let you read that there, but it's verse 12. If you want to go read that, and you'll see what I'm talking about there, but we won't get into that. But anyways, so we got 5 that are here, that show up here. And are these the 5 that are fallen? That make up the whole kingdom here, right? So, anyways, very interesting. And I don't understand why these guys aren't talked about that much. And why Satan is called a cherubim, where nowhere in the Bible does he call him a cherubim. He calls him a dragon, which goes with a fiery serpent. But anyways, so let's move back to Warhammer 40k, because we got the star gods of the Bible, right, per se, the fallen angels, the seraphim. Okay. So, recent history. Since the Great Awakening, the C'tan have appeared as bound shards, used as unwilling weapons of war. However, there are isolated reports of C'tan shards across the galaxy that have broken their chains, intent on revenge, and various free shards of the Deceiver are noted to have begun actively working to various ends. One shard of the Deceiver manipulated members of the Alpha Legion to construct a series of anti-warp pylons within the galactic core before it was trapped in Tesseract Labyrinth. Another shard instigated the Gothic War, which saw the destruction of 4 talismans of Vol, ancient weapons of the Old Ones, notably used to battle the Void Dragon. Other independent shards of the Deceiver have appeared upon Neogeddon, and Gladius, leading Necrons and even gathering new slaves in the form of pariahs and followers amongst the ranks of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The armies of the Imperium are known to guard the gates of Varl in a quiescent perils of the C'tan. I believe that's how you say that. Anyways, some members of the Thok dynasty know that feral infant C'tan still dwell in the stars. And you got transcendent C'tans, but they're, I'll just read the first part of this, are bursting with pure elemental energy. Each transcendent C'tan is a collection of anywhere between 12 and 100 lesser shards, and its power far surpasses the sum of its parts. Okay, now we're going to wind it down here, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you liked the video, thank you for doing that. And if you didn't like the video, thank you for at least giving me a chance. And I want to plug in my memberships. I do have memberships, and you'll be helping out the channel a lot. Right now, you'll have access to the Discord. You'll be able to ask me questions. I want to start promoting that more now. And I wanted you guys to be able to have a way of connecting with me, right? Especially the members. And I'm trying to figure out what to do for like member videos. I'm thinking like maybe streams where we play games, stuff like that. You know, because I don't want to gate content, especially biblical content, and put it behind a paywall. You know what I mean? I don't feel good doing that. So I'll figure out something to give you members something to, you know, do it for. So that way you guys can have access to something that, you know, the free people don't and stuff like that. And, well, part of that is the Discord, you know, but anyways. But I do want to open that up to others, you know, to the free people who just watch my content. But anyways, thank you guys. And you guys have a wonderful day.